At the very outset, take a moment to set the right motivation, preferably in tune with Bodhicitta, wishing that whatever merit we accumulate from listening to the Dharma and sitting to this session may always be ultimate benefit to oneself and for others. Now to continue from where we left earlier, we have already spent several sessions discussing on the dissatisfactory nature, the limitations and dissatisfactory nature, the suffering nature of samsara in general. In particular, we looked at the conditions in the realms of the lower births, and also we looked specifically into the condition of being born as a human being, and we saw how, so long as our condition of birth, wherever it may be, so long as it is governed by the affected emotions and the actions triggered by them, they are inlaid with layers and levels of sufferings and dissatisfaction and limitations. And so long as not only physically but also mentally or psychologically or spiritually we kind of remain low in our perspective and lose the depth of spiritual awareness, then not only on a physical level but even more so on mental and physical psychological level, we would have aggravated the suffering condition, the limiting condition, and thus invite, so to say, or welcome or build up our layers of suffering upon oneself. And this is how we ordinarily spend our life in the samsara. So, quoting from Shantideva's Bodhicharvatara, where he says that this human rebirth, this precious human rebirth, is to be looked upon as a boat that is capable of carrying us across the ocean of samsara. So long as we lose that perspective towards our precious human birth and look at it only as a mere goal or something that we kind of get stuck in only what do you call adorning it, not at all thinking of using, not at all thinking of its potential and the precious opportunity of being used to cross the ocean of samsara, and just merely get stuck in kind of adorning it for its sake, then we completely miss the point, and it would be a great, what do you call, loss on our part to have, in a way, abused this precious human rebirth we have attained. Looking from several points of view, the human rebirth that we have now gained is almost like gained accidentally or through extreme fortune, which cannot be hoped to come about again and again. And thus, we need to wake up from our deep, spiritual sleep, so to say, and open our eyes to the deeper meaning of life and see the deeper potential and the uses that human rebirth can be put into, and thus approach it, pursue it properly, so that this once gained precious human rebirth can be used properly, rather than miss the point in merely by merely adorning it, or by merely stuck, but by merely being stuck in kind of abusing it for attaining very trivial, temporary aims, and not being able to use it for what it is really worth for.
对不起，我现在有一个通告那些需要我们翻译的师兄请你们坐到我们的朋友那边。请你们坐到我的左边，就是你们的右边那边华文翻译可以听到。
需要华文翻译的，请们坐到那边去；英语翻译的就坐在这边。
我们刚才忘记告诉你们，请你们坐靠近那个 speaker， 靠近芙蓉，你站起来靠近我们这个师兄这边越靠近越好。如果你们听不到，尽量把椅子拉靠近他。OK， 谢谢。
In particular, we looked at the conditions within samsara, even as a human being. We saw how at the very outset, the birth process itself is very, very painful, and then it's followed by a long-term, infancy, and also a little part of our childhood, where our physical and mental conditions are too sensitive, and it is very much vulnerable to so many sufferings and problems and disappointments. And then intermittently we are infected by all kinds of illnesses, and thus perfect balance of health is kind of a very, very occasional thing, and it's just a matter of just a simple part or a very tiny part of our body being affected, that all of a sudden the balance is completely lost, and thus we undergo several kinds of inconveniences, and sometimes even fatal illnesses can infect us. And then right from the very moment of our birth, we kind of incessantly, continuously move towards our death, and then in the course of doing so, we become our body and mental capabilities kind of disintegrate, and then eventually it is crystallized in what we call old age. And you can see how on top of the characteristic sufferings and limitations, dissatisfaction as a human being, within samsara, a human being controlled by the emotions and the actions triggered by them. We see how old age then brings up even more sufferings and more difficulties, not just for oneself but for others also. How the very process itself is very, very painful and very debilitating. And then sooner or later death strikes, and then even our very cherished body that accompanied us from our birth, right from our birth, even that we have to part with, and there is no question about our other possessions and names and fames, positions, whatever wealth, whatever one may have accumulated in the course of one's life, all we have to either willingly or unwillingly, we have to part with them. And besides that, human beings have this very unique problem, unique suffering, so to say, of this extreme imaginative ability. Of course, if we are capable of using it, utilizing it properly, then this could be an added resource, added asset to make our life more livable and more happy and whatnot. But ordinarily, we very often are confused in that, and then we tend to use our imaginative power, or imaginative ability to add on more suffering to oneself and others. Very often it's the case that whatever we wish for are not met, and whatever we have not wished for, whatever we wish not to meet, something that befall us quite often. And irrespective of deliberate efforts we make into one direction or the other, quite often we meet with failure. So from a Buddhist perspective, it is not merely confined to physical conditions and causes that result in these failures or whatnot. Rather, it is inlaid with our samsaric condition of our very existence being governed by afflicted emotions and actions triggered by them, that these are nothing but part and parcel of our samsaric existence, samsaric condition itself. And so looking at these, we have to try to look deeper into the meaning of life, and look deeper through the superficialities, and try to come to terms with the deeper spiritual principles and spiritual principles and spiritual conditions that kind of rule or that govern, that condition our existence, and try to kind of utilize them, try to understand them and utilize them. At least on the physical level, we will still continue to be bound by our own past karmas and the afflicted emotions. Yet on the mental level, on the psychological level, on the mental level, emotional level, if we make deliberate attempt, we can see how through our attempt we can bring up, give rise to, at the very least, flashes of liberation, or flashes of joy, lasting, genuine joy. And those are signs that, if provided we make effort, we can, we can put an end to this perpetual, habitual pattern, even on the mental level, of accumulating known virtues and samsaric actions that in turn then kind of, lead to more such actions and causes for our samsaric existence in the long run. So we can see how, at the very least, on the mental level, if we could understand the mechanism, so to say, of samsaric existence, the causes and the results, the law of causation within samsara, then we can see how through our effort we can make a big difference in terms of the quality of our life, in terms of how we get affected by others, how we can affect others in a more positive way from our spiritual or mental, psychological learning, psychological training. And thus, when this is pursued continuously, rigorously, and intensely, and continuously, then we can see how that can eventually help in cutting through the causes of our downfall into samsaric existence.
他的能有他来了，是说好什么他这样的那个他要忙归于他离着不少见的，讲到这样的，讲到他去跟这边看的有来就出现了，这个这边用个没有打，用个有这他的他们马出来的这这边个东西，他那个往去啊，他往去啊，这个还有那个这个那样子的，他是被别人参加了什么那个机会的这，他是那个被一个钱的嘛，做这些不是主要就没问题，那他们也弄这个马特别的，那个这个马路不说这个地理的参加结婚了，这个马会有这个农村的都是这个嘛，那皮的嘛切出来这个都是有，我当然了，他们也很简单的，还有感觉那个差不多的这个基本上的还有感觉差不多动画的这个没那个，还有感觉差不多钱。现在他们也他的毛病，他们也皮球，他们也怕了，特别大。这个他那个气垫的也是这个气垫啊，这个带了我都听那些，那个毕竟年轻人怎么的东西，带了还有带了不高兴，我这个东西，那就他这个米比较嘛，我们那就比高压的也有嘛。吃的不，这上面还是米的，米的那个有个，这个吃的一般都是做大锅的，我当人家去我做福建的，我都给说的是本地不产的，那这个雷饼的什么这个，我这个我那时候这个地界的下面的，那吃的不的来我那这样。我这个主要什么搞完这个有的，他的联系的那个联系方呢，主要什么人家说的不得的，那主要不是我这个这个那，过这个我的哈不这个中间他把的车，我这是那托里车吃的不的这个。说出那不愿意不老面是的，本来的那中间的用过，我这个看到了这样，我没有看到，说了中间没有啊，这个没有做，在网上有嘛那个中间没有嘛的，现在他们是离中国的上这个这个公平的，离中国的谁的，他们都是那个在那里些，他们嘛。बेटियों का डबल डबल खाना को फला तो मतलब रवाय जो ने जो इधर जाना कर देगी ना जाना हम डबल साल में को का कर को का दे दूंगा दोनों ने जो हाथ तो में का हाथ के देखो तो सुना तो ये का सब ये लिंक आई气呗，人会觉得这个多了，这个上这个我就多了，容易觉得这个哪是现在是呗，我当那个就是谁的，那每个人跟这个我就觉得，那别的话了说这边关系，要说了就要这个要这个，现在他说我这个。好多那些东北的，苏州人就东北的路，好了路去就东北的路去，我当时这个 Meeting Masa Chicken, put the book in the way of the was the put the game ever done. The was the put the put them with what the career and Tabatosana to the Stivat that young teacher, so that the big man. Cause of where the having the naked or the taking a room, shoot up the achieving a channel. And then the part of Tabia. I thought she would get the Kumuy and Asia working at the top, while at the Edo, Tabat and the Chimama in the chicken.
So the condition of birth or existence within samsara being characterized by suffering is not merely limited to those of the lower realms of existence, but even as we have seen in the human form, human rebirth also, even the higher rebirths within samsara are also characterized by sufferings of their own level and of their own what do you call condition. Like we have seen in the human condition, the God realms or the celestial being realms are also not exception. Among the celestial realms, the beings there are categorized as the celestial beings of the form, God form celestial realm, formless celestial realm. There are other beings characterized as demigods. Even their conditions are not supposed to be completely free from suffering, and also they are characterized by limitations and dissatisfaction, since no matter how relatively, materially more, resourceful and more equipped and more facilitated their conditions may be. And due to that, how they compared to the human beings and also the lower realms of existence, they hardly come upon or experience suffering at a gross level until towards the very, very end of their life, and how they are kind of through the abundance of facilities and pleasures and whatnot, they're kind of almost like insensitized to the deeper meanings of life, to the deeper principles of life, and how through that they kind of almost reel in constant pleasure. Yet that kind of a condition has the worst effect, has the worst effect of desensitizing them or insensitizing them to the deeper meanings of life, and how they then pass their life almost in constant distraction and constant pleasure, and how towards the end then they realize through several signs of their imminent death, like losing their natural luster that they have been having since their birth, or generating beginning to generate unwanted, unpleasant odor, physical odor, and also due to their meditative quality, because part of their birth into the celestial realm has to be caused by karmic actions accumulated through meditative conditions, through meditative powers, meditative abilities called civilizations and absorptions. And due to those meditative abilities, towards the end of their life, they are said to be able to foresee where they are going to be born, and given the very fact that they would have already wasted their entire life in complete distraction and pleasures, the imminent death would be mostly into the lower realms, and thus the very and feeling themselves completely helpless at that point of time. That kind of realization sets in unimaginably excruciating mental pain, and that's how they kind of have to spend their life towards the end, and then also towards the end as a sign of their disintegration, sign of their decomposition, so to say. They lose friends, and none of them kind of cares to come closer to kind of see them through that process. And thus everyone is sometimes so distracted and so kind of steeped deep in the superficial sensual pleasures that they hardly care about others. This is how, no matter, despite their relative, relatively better quality of life in a material sense, and also in terms of their physical ability and physical qualities point of view, yet at the same time it is steeped in suffering in this way. And thus we can see, no matter where one is born, so long as one's condition is governed by afflicted emotions, and afflicted emotions rooted in self-preoccupation and rooted in self-grasping, and the actions triggered by them, so long as one's condition is triggered, governed by them, which is to say, so long as one remains in samsara and be bound with afflicted emotions in one's dealings, in one's activities, then no matter where one is born, depending on occasional either negative karma or relatively positive karma, which one needs to be impelled into the human realm and also in the celestial realm, no matter what conditions one may occasionally be able to accumulate and be impelled in a higher or lower degree, but so long as it is within samsara, it is in fact of itself suffering, and that there is no end to suffering by itself unless and until one makes deliberate effort in cutting through the root of samsara. This way, reflecting on the suffering nature, or the dissatisfactory nature of samsara in general, and in specific on the suffering natures of the lower realms of existence, if we could generate a sense of revulsion, a sense of disinterest, so to say, into samsaric birth, wherever it may be, and to develop a strong urge to be liberated or to free ourselves from that kind of bondage, then that would mark a beginning of our spiritual journey into the practices or into the practices of the middling school practitioner. And it is with the generation of this, what we usually call the sense of renunciation over the entire samsaric existence, that we can then develop, advance through our spiritual path in actually, realizing our gradual freedom from the bondage of afflicted emotions and the actions taken by them. Now, in this regard, we have seen that the afflicted emotions, they are themselves not an intrinsic fabric of our mind, but rather they are adventitious in that they are themselves, temporarily generated through misconception and through miscalculation of the actual reality, of actual state of existence of things around us, including ourselves. And through such miscalculation, misconception, then we develop afflicted emotions in form of desire, greed, jealousy, anger, hatred, etc., etc. And they in turn, then trigger actions, physical actions, through the three doors of our dissipation mind, and through that, then they leave a strong imprint on our mind, mental continuum, and because of that, we not only undergo immediate effects, immediate suffering or immediate experiences due to them, but also they leave a strong imprint of our mind, kind of make our mind more habituated in that pattern, and thus that habituation then in turn, make us more susceptible to similar action, similar bad action, and that kind of then builds up the tendency on our mental continue, and that then makes the freedom from samsara more difficult and more, more established, and more difficult, and kind of make us more established into the maya of samsara. So that's how we should be able to understand, based on this urge to be liberated or free from samsara. We should then look forward to what causes our samsaric existence, and how our actions related to the affected emotions, and how and what are these affected emotions rooted in, and how this root cause of the affections can be eliminated, can be eradicated, something like that. So that way, then the urge for freedom would have led us into the right path to actually, put us on the actual path to an eventual freedom from suffering, or freedom from samsara. Otherwise, the mere urge for freedom will not be sufficient to put us, to lead us to such a freedom. And in this regard, reflecting on the 12 links of dependent origination is very, very eye-opening and very helpful in terms of making us aware of the process of our, process that leads to samsaric existence, and also the process that will lead us out of it, and that way getting to know, identify the affected emotions in the first hand, and see how destructive they are in not only in the not only in the short term, but also in the long term, and how with the affected emotions within one's mental continuum, how that kind of completely destroys our mental atmosphere, and how this affected emotion itself is rooted in what we call self-grasping and adherence, blind adherence to a completely fabricated notion of self, or completely fabricated notion of how things exist. And based on that kind of fabrication, then we develop anger, jealousy, greed towards the respective objects of pleasantness or unpleasantness. And this is how then we kind of really real deep into the process leading to samsaric existence. So this is how we should be able to understand the mechanism of samsaric existence, and this kind of understanding, this kind of realization should then make us aware of what leads us out of it.
Tancho ke sengo para ale rani pe koi ke na shin samba chi pe rol pe joa chi ko ye jo chi ko chi ba chi pe na ya da a sa ka sa ye ke ade pe ye to na ta ke joa dewa to ba no na samba ko so sa ya ko ma se ke la de su de sa Day6 so poi na lo guru ko to na to de pe shi ne ya da ro de chi pa de so pe chi dewa da pa chi pa de ne ma se pa chi pa de sa de ba na dewa da pa chi de da ya da se na de pe dewa ro ko ba se de ne se ko ba chi na ro de lenge lo yo se ka lo sa na ne se de ka chi na ro de machi manu bache na sanje me yoma ro de machi manu yoma matu ko pe chiwa pe raha ya chiwa pe sa chu de ta chi pa pe raha wa ne chiwa ko sa ne sa le de ta pe chiwa na ne bi se ta nge chi ko wa sa chen ma be pe chiwa le machi manu bache de ta chi ne machi kumar sa ba de ta sa ge ta chi ma chi ta le sa na pe chiwa le na me ba pe chiwa pe ta ke sa de sa chu de ta na ni chiwa na ta chiwa le ma le raha sa na me mai tu da jashu chu ta ro ta sai tu me jo se ugur ru swa da de ke mai be tu ta pe raha jage na sa chu de ru ma de ne de raha jage na te ke ru ma de se ta de ke chwa na ma che ne me da ko ta ma che me da ko ta ko pe je ka ke se to yo me ta ma de che de ke ma pe je chi su de se che de ma je ka de che de ma pe na so che me de ne li che me de ka wa chi me de wa ta de ke se pe ka the ta me de so che me ta na ko pe so de ko pe che de ma de ke che ma ta na so to ko de yo ma se so che me li de che de ma ke ko ta da me ko de che ma de che ne li de che ka wa chi me che ka de sa ma ke ka pe mai ko pa na na de li de na mai ka wa ka de che se de pe che no ke ka su maga ta la pe to kono ta me chala so ko ma chala ta ke se te ko yo ata ne pe na to she to te ne ke to shi ku ti te ne che chong ba ne sa ya ni ri ba ro ke ane ya chi cha te ma de pe to be ko ro de no che ka ma de be ke ka che ni wa ma se ta sa to mo ta te ne chi ti cha ko ma ta ba na che ba ta che ke ka chi de ke te da te ne ka ka che no che de ka tu be le ji ku ta no je ne sa ma be yo ba che ta mo ne che o ma se na che de ma de ke ta che be che sai su de ke be jo no che te de ya su ya ke ta be ka sa be kazi drama da de ko ya de ko ro ko jo ko ta ne jo le de uma da de ko ya de ke ne bi te da na je ka kazi da ane te be de ke ya ne che ta ya ane ma jo te ye te ma jo te ya to so ka re bi je de ya se de ke ma de ya so ne te de chi thwa re ma ta also
in this regard, it's very helpful to reflect on the Four Noble Truths that Buddha taught during his very first sermon, public sermon after enlightenment. And there he began with the truth of suffering. By that he meant to identify the true sufferings. Very often the problem with us is that we do not understand, we do not identify the true sufferings. We rather misunderstand them for pleasures and for joy and for sources of happiness, and then kind of pursue them extreme by extreme, and to the point we become completely obsessed with them, and that kind of obsession then leads us deeper and deeper into suffering. So most of in the very beginning, the first problem is identifying suffering to the suffering. So this can be applied to applied to a variety of our conditions, a variety of our what do you call behavior, in terms of our action, in terms of our habits, in terms of customs, etc., etc. We can apply and try to see deeply into their nature, rather than be merely carried away by our desire or the mere custom mere custom that's prevailing, or kind of give in to the force of our desire, of our mere sense of desire and strong lust. If we do so, then that's missing the first point of identifying suffering as suffering. And if we fail there, then our next step of looking for the cause of the suffering will be completely out of question. So that's how Buddha began with the truth of suffering, to identify true suffering as suffering. And then from there we go a step further in then looking for the cause of the suffering. Once we have located the cause of suffering, then we can see whether those causes of suffering are amenable to changes through antidotal practices or not. And once we have seen that, then we can see the possibility, we can get a glimpse of freedom from the causes of suffering and the sufferings altogether. And once we have that kind of a glimpse, then we can be properly motivated and instigated to work towards to work on the paths that can bring about gradual eradication of the causes of suffering along with suffering, and thus make freedom or the state of nirvana an actual possibility, a practical possibility. So this is how we should approach, and that's the very reason why we dwelt at length on the suffering nature of samsara. It is not to make us kind of gloomy and not to make us depressed, rather kind of make us come to terms with the actual reality of our condition and not really become carried away by our own confusion and miscalculation and kind of reeling into that misconception. Rather see deeper into the actual condition and see the sufferings for sufferings, and thus kind of make a proper proper headway to eventual freedom from suffering that we all wish for. And then once we have reflected on the suffering nature of samsara at large and developed this urge towards freedom from samsara, from the sacred existence for oneself, and then that marks the entry into the level of the middle scope practitioner, and that's a point of spiritual advancement or spiritual growth where we would have developed a genuine concern, genuine unmistaken concern over our samsaric condition on the individual level. And once we have developed that, then there is a possibility of extending that concern towards all sentient beings and see how that very awareness of samsaric existence surrounding one's own condition is applicable to all sentient beings around us. And thereby, through that kind of awareness, that we can extend that concern that we have at the beginning developed upon ourselves, on all other sentient beings, and then hope for a genuine genuine, undiscriminating, spontaneous, deep-rooted sense of love and compassion and sense of concern towards others. So this then marks our preparation to develop further on the spiritual path and eventually come to the level of the greater scope of practitioner. At this point, we have a short break.
这老人时代当中给人的做的三千年。
Now, in terms of extending our concern from merely focus on oneself to all other sentient beings, of course, the very starting point is to see that at the very base of our existence, we are all same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, irrespective of our temporary, life forms, temporary realms of birth, all across the samsara, all sentient beings, all beings that have the capability of experiencing joy or suffering or misery, we all have this commonality. We all share this commonality of instinctually wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So on that basis also, we can extend that sense of concern over the suffering nature of all sentient beings and kind of develop this urge to work not only for oneself but also for others, and wish that all others be also equally free from suffering. And now, in terms of actually going about training in broadening one's concern from merely focus on oneself to say gradually to others and eventually to all sentient beings as vast as equal as the space. One method or one lineage of instruction to develop this kind of a universal concern is by training in seeing how all other sentient beings are or have been very kind to oneself, how one has benefited from them, one still benefits and one has been benefiting from them. And in this regard, depending on the culture of a time period, particularly in this regard, it's almost like a universal custom across the history that every society holds the image of mother very high, and that particularly has to do with how at the very outset of our birth, a mother undergoes all selfless suffering for oneself, and how since conception the mother undergoes all the sufferings, all inconveniences, all sufferings, even to the point of risking their own life. And then after birth, how through the infancy they see us through that very state of complete reliance on others, of our complete extreme sensitivity, of our complete delicate life, and put at our disposal everything that the mother cherishes, including their own life, and wishes everything good for us, no matter how confused they may be in terms of how to go about cultivating the goodnesses, the happinesses they may wish for, irrespective of how confused they are or how well informed they are. But they mean to be of ultimate and utmost benefit for us, and then out of such a genuine urge they do the best they can, and that's how they see us through our period of infancy and childhood, and even after we consider ourselves having kind of risen on our own feet, even then also their concern doesn't stop there. They still feel concerned about us and keep thinking about our welfare and thinking of how our condition could be improved like that, irrespective of how far their vision is in terms of what goodnesses could come about. irrespective of that, they still keep concerned and keep worrying about us. And in terms of their concern, there's almost like no stop to that. They keep worrying about whether we are cold, whether we are too hard, or whether we are doing one extreme or the other extreme, and likewise they keep. There's no end to their sense of concern extended towards us, and this is how they live their life until their very end. And so this is how we see our mother in this life, and extending from that, we from the principles of rebirth and our continual birth into samsara from beginningless time, we can then extend from that it's not just this time that others have someone in the image of our mother has benefited us immensely, but rather one cannot pinpoint one or single out one sentient being and say this has not served as one's mother. That too, not just once, but for countless times from beginningless time that we have been born until now. So that way, beginning from our reflection on the kindnesses of our mother in this lifetime, and then extending it to apply to all sentient beings, then we can develop a strong sense of having benefited from them, even at the cost of their own life, and how they have undergone sufferings, miseries, and inconveniences of all kinds for our own sake, irrespective of how confused they may be in terms of how to go about bringing joy, lasting joy and happiness, whatnot, irrespective of that, their genuine sense of discrimination. And that's how we begin to extend our concern from being focused merely on ourselves to gradually to others, that too without any discrimination based on the temporary relationships or temporary arrangements and relationships, but rather kind of working from the basis through which it can be extended to all sentient beings without any discrimination.
사실 그거 그다음에 이제 제가 돌아와야 되는 시제에 대한 좋아하는 마음도 스스로 지속되게 뭔가 여러분들은 어떻게 요구하는데 이제 시제에 대한 좋아 이제 시제에 대한 요구하는데 제가 저도 또 사이에 예전 언제에 그래서 시제에 대한 좋아하는 산이 쉐도 또 많이 나 시제에 대한 좋아하는 지금 가서 좋아하는 요구하는데 그래서 예전 언제에 며칠 되게 프로젝트 기계에 들어가서 소식을 통하는 집이 받아서 로마처럼 되게 소위에 대한 좋아하는 마음도 전달 받는 좋아하는 소식이 다내가 있는 전달을 그때 여부에 어떻게 심을 그래서 전달 때 좋아하는 마음도 그렇지 어떤 총바에 있는 총기고 총바인데 샤는 데요 샤는 좀 샤는 그걸로 그때 제 계산한 게 좋아하는 마음인데 그다음에 나 제가 진짜 제 생각에 아주 같은 식으로 이거는 너무 되게 마치고 대단하니까 진짜 제 생각에 아주 같은 식으로 내가 이제 집안에 있으니까 셰프야 되는데 차가운 가서 그게 되게 좋아하는 아버지하고 대세지하고 되게 지혜로운 그리고 그냥 잡아보고 사실 이제 정말 이제 정말 대화가 남자를 만나 대화가 되니까 서포트가 많은데 제가 이제 차수들 센터들에 친구들이 있었는데 제 집안에 제 집안 나도 정말 그런 집안에 되게 좋아하는 하대 때리고 그런 집안에 다리 보였는데 그때는 아무도 다 같이 나를 잡고 그런 거한테 그런 집안에 되는 좀 이제 집안에 봤을 때 뭔가 그게 저한테 좀 그거를 옛날 처음에 좀 제가 보고 갔어요. 제 집안에 되고 나도 이제 이제 집안에 로 집안에 사는 제 집안에 되고 로야 제 야도 있거든. 로야 그게 좀 나도 좀 이제 안에
So it is merely a case of our transcendence between lives, our migration between lives, that we forget about the kindnesses of others through their having served as our mother. Every time we are born into samsara in all different realms of existence, and that this kind of a forgetfulness doesn't make it any less, and doesn't make all others any less kind and any less any less important to us, provided we can see this effect of our life. And likewise, we have seen that our mothers, they do their best in kind of passing on to their children, whatever they may know, whatever they may think is helpful, whatever they may think is valuable, they try to pass it on to their children, and that's out of a genuine, strong, deep-rooted sense of concern, a sense of love and care towards us. And this is the same. This is the way. This is the same way that all other sentient beings, irrespective, without exception, have served us through countless lifetimes in the past, and will continue to do so in our future lifetimes also. And By the same token of how we can see others have served, have benefited us through their serving as our mother, likewise by the same token we can see how others, even while they are not our mothers, even while they are not our mothers, they benefit us in all possible ways. In one way or the other, they still benefit us, and we receive their benefit. And this way, if we could look how our very survival is due to others in all possible ways, and how no matter what qualities we may have that we may pride on, that we may boast of, they are all due to others. There's not a single thing, single achievement, either that be in the way of wealth, in the way of health, in the way of possession, in the way of education, whatever there is that we can think of, that we pride on, that we boast on. There's nothing that in which others have not benefited us, in which others have no hand or say in it, have no share in it. And if we think clearly, particularly say the concept of fame, name, etc., something that we so aspire to achieve, that work so hard to achieve and kind of undergo, we are ready to undergo all kinds of hardship to achieve them. I mean, the very concept of fame and name, they are totally dependent on others. If it weren't for others to appreciate for one image or the other, then our having received any kind of a big name or fame, it would not be completely, would not be at all possible. And likewise is the case with any other achievement, any other comfort, any other excellences, whatever that we pride on, that we aspire to work for, and upon achieving them we feel happy and joy. They are all dependent on others. So that way, if we would look at how our very survival is due to others, then we can gradually hope to at least begin to make a dent, so to say, or at least begin to make a dent to our so strongly ingrained sense of selfishness and so strong sense of self-preoccupation, and that way it will then eventually give way to a more altruistic attitude, more altruistic concern, more altruistic way of thinking, and this can then be the key to our joy, to our lasting joy, to the joy of ourselves and others. Because selfishness, though we have taken up this attitude to facilitate our basic instinct for more happiness and less suffering, yet in taking up selfishness as a means to accomplish that, in doing so, we are completely misinformed, we are completely misled by our understanding, by our assumption that selfishness leads to fulfillment of that basic instinct. Because selfishness has been our way all through our life from beginningless time, and we can see now where it has led us to. And if we still keep on depending or relying on selfishness, looking to selfishness as a key or as a way, as the only way to our joy and happiness, then all it will continue to do is make our condition more terrible, more miserable, and kind of put us or keep us more steeply, steeply mired or steeply, caught into the network of samsaric existence. So this is something we need to realize, and through reflecting on the interconnectedness of our life, and how all the excellences that we aspire for, all the freedom of suffering that we aspire for, that we so dearly, unmistakably aspire to achieve, they are all related, they are all dependent on others, and how others, even within their confusion, even within their own misgivings, they benefit us in one way or the other, and how at the very least they continuously carry the potential of immense benefit to us, either in the short term or in the long term, irrespective of what their relationship are with us and what their attitude are with us. Even in the very, very worst situation also, they at the very least carry an immense potential for our spiritual growth, spiritual awakening, provided we could unlock that, provided we could discover that, we could relate to them from that angle, rather than kind of get carried away from by our own misgiving, by our own misconception, miscalculation of things, and end up kind of strengthening our what we call selfishness and myopic way of looking at things, and particularly our selfishness and self-preoccupation.
Shasingate Shida Chibate Yobacheta, Shasingate Jeshipima, Shasingate Jeshipima, some Bila, and Jikochi particular, Singate, the Sunday, Mission was Control, Shadakani, watching the Sunday, the Tomato, that's it, that is the Google to us. Just Kasabagi Toma Chiteta Sabet, Chichin, Yongu or Mato, you mentioned the Gavichu, and she Thomas, the League Coba, Chitek Coba, Conversation which he the Yoma, Chitek Coba, Chief, the Cheva, not the man. Tembi tahu tembi jadi tembi mencila cita dah kalah kata sepi mencila cita tadi cukup orang mana dah sebenarnya berjata tu kenapa cita tadi orang mana orang kira cita tadi orang mana kalau cita betul sama dah jadi orang cita tadi Jay on the Yoga Marisa. Another way the Muchia, the Rocky Needles, about the Jay, and Galugpa. What that the Jay, Gelugpa song, with the research in the digging, taking, and that's the Chadam of the world that is Rocky Needles, the Ajak Cha, Radas in the Ajak Kamachi, me, Mita, Tam, and the Jay. She did that Timu Chiga, the car Kofu Chiga, and then she don't Chiga, not the big Gilom Saga. She said, near the Hajam the Chabati, no, the Tachi, the Vision, what's the new big Masagi, not that is nothing going on, so the yard. Kare chudile ne kare nan de chita ro me samana ti ke ke to ji sagi at be dai na be thachi de be da in ba je ti be namba ka jo prothama me ba dai ba ji marse ase nge ba me ko rishe ba na ne paru be ro ni che ne be ro ko ma che ne ro ko ma Penjata tadi itu doktor jadi kita jadi cem mana bayar mana saya jaya ni. Tadi itu cici itu cici dah ada. Ini apa kata dah sana berjaya berarti dua mana. Ni dah terlalu paman itu kan. Sejual paman boleh orang belanja dah sana. Orang tu besu orang tu kita orang sebat tu sejual lah jadi cem mana apa yang mana. Jadi cendol ada. Cendol ni nak beri apa? Cuma thoma memang ni, kalau pada beri, di tampak ada beri bagi apa? Cendol dah ini, di tampak ada beri bagi apa? Dah ni orang main kerja sejati ni, di tampak ada dah ni orang main kerja ni apa? Baru dah baru ni. Jadi tadi dah. Nata bagai berarti, orang yang bercuti cepat berarti bangun berarti cuci raja ni langsal kasih ni dah kasih cepat berarti keceres kaya mana itu cepat ada. Ni ina le, jaya ina le, sama cepat berarti kita. Tengah kita senci kita. Kingdom which is Chitu Sona, where Ajay Ajay
So, this way, if we could begin to see how our very survival, let alone other achievements, other facilities, other positions and whatnot that we aspire for, let alone then even our very survival is dependent on others, how others contribute to our welfare. And if we could see that irrespective of our immediate relationship with them, then we can see how we can give rise, or we can give birth to a genuine sense of care, genuine sense of regard towards others, irrespective of our immediate relationship, irrespective of our immediate connection with them. Because ordinarily, our sense of care is very much limited to our near and dear ones, and with respect to others, we even conversely, tend to feel justified, to feel just the opposite, to feel kind of contempt of them, and also to disregard them, and sometimes even feel justified to bring about harm on them. So ordinarily, our sense of care, no matter how strong and how intense it may be, it is smeared, it is tainted by attachment and our sense of discrimination based on very, very temporary, trivial reasons. And what that kind of in a way, this is like an extension of our own selfishness. It is basically based on the notion of me, I, mine, and thus it is again rooted in selfishness, and all that does is kind of contribute to kind of a polarity, a sense of polarity within us with regard to others, kind of feeling too extremely attached to or close to some, and too extremely distant and even opposite to others, and that kind of a sense of care and that kind of a sense of relationship is based on an irrational reasoning. Besides that, it is nothing but an extension of our selfishness, and that tends to bring in more suffering and more negative actions on our part. Instead, if we could extend that sense of care to all others based on the rational stance, like seeing all others being equal in wanting happiness, not wanting suffering, and being rightful in wishing so, in working towards them, and also how, irrespective of our immediate relationship, all others have served as our mother from timeless birth, and how in all these instances of serving as our mother, they have even gone to the extent of being ready to risk their own life for our welfare, and how they have treated us and taken care of us. And also seeing how even in this very lifetime, in their own different relationships with us, they still continue to serve us and benefit us, and how in their very worst situation, say worst relationship with us as a recognized enemy or someone who deliberately intended to harm us, even in that very position, they carry this very the potential of being great, immense benefit to us in teaching love and compassion and tolerance and whatnot. So in kind of thinking along these lines, which are applicable universally, then we could hope to develop a sense of universal love and compassion. Of course, we have special responsibility to our dear ones, to our children, to our relatives, and whatnot, to our temporary, relationship, through our temporary connection. So, by reflecting on the universal connection, we should not, neglect that and overlook that. Of course, we owe special responsibility in caring after them, but that kind of a care should not conversely lead us to look down upon others, disregard others, rather than feel equally concerned although not necessarily directly bound in one's responsibility in the same way as one's children and near ones, yet at the same time feel very concerned about their welfare, and that way we could develop a strong sense of concern towards others, a strong sense of caring towards others, and if we could develop this kind of attitude, this would then have the effect of gradually replacing our self-preoccupation, our selfishness. And if that becomes the case, then we could very securely say that that would be the beginning of a genuine, lasting joy and happiness for ourselves and for others. And that, when pursued further, can eventually land us to the highest state of achievement in the spiritual sense, in the state of Buddhahood. And thus, our very, basic instinct, basic aspiration for genuine, lasting joy and happiness would be fulfilled only through that. And also through this, one could become a great source of benefit, ultimate benefit to all other sentient beings. So in a nutshell, as Shantideva says in his Bodhicharya, says that in this world, all happiness is due to cherishing others. All sufferings, miseries is due to cherishing oneself. So this point we should realize by seeing through the examples of our real life, see how our selfishness is the root of so many kinds of friction, so many kinds of discomfort in dealing with others, how it is the source of making us more tended to be angry with others, more tended to be easily annoyed with others, more tended to be jealous of others, and see how jealousness or anger, greed, all these things, even at the very moment they are generated with us, our very peace of mind is disturbed. And then once we follow that, once we are carried away by that, we can see how that triggers unwanted actions that can affect our own welfare and affect the welfare of others. That kind of completely, disturbs the peaceful atmosphere around us. And from a karmic point of view, it is through these actions triggered by the affected emotions in the form of anger, jealousy, greed, whatnot, that these actions then impel us into the lower realms of existence. And thus they affect our welfare not only in this life but all through the future lifetimes. Whereas if conversely we control our affected emotions and kind of put a restraint on our selfish tendency and try to kind of chip it away by kind of reinforcing our sense of altruism towards others and eventually work towards replacing it with altruism, then we can see how under the influence of the altruistic attitude, our very action of relating to others will be completely transformed in a positive sense, and how through engaging in those actions that comes out through altruistic sense of dealing with others leads us from happy states to more happy states, and eventually land us into the highest state of achievement in terms of the lasting joy and happiness. So that way, if we could work in what we usually call replacing self-cherishing or selfishness with altruistic attitude, cherishing others, then we can see that really marks the beginning of genuine lasting joy for oneself and for others.
Mary Mori, the Chikanaji, and the Rosso, the Yapasabata, the Zombi Sabata, that the big Yapasaba, the Ranch in the Ranch in the Kasapagi, the Gisa, the Tanta Mori, but the King on the Ross, the Yapachi. Kasapagi, Congress, the Share the Tarachona, somebody not the Moshi, but that the day is somebody to Dashan, the Jeep, but the Chip, Ranching, but the Southern, that's Jen, the Jay Yard, Southern, around the yard wrong in the chip and somebody, the ticket, the such the jeep, the big dog, the big dog started the theater, the casual student, Nakal Tayo, Nagat Tamu, Sijan Tayo, Sijan Tayo, never Dungan Tayo, that the Kaju Sijan Tajip, Gawat Tajip, the Chimara Summer ticket, that the same Chimara. That Gawat Tajip, the Tajip, the Joa, Chi, around the round of the cook over the US, Karasana, around the Tagasa, the Sijan, Chigi, the round of Machi, Machi, the train, Jambal, had a movie with thank you for today, the Soba Jamana, Shada Haja with the Maro, Chimi of the Casa, around the Ma, and be me no one the case of Comedy of Salma Sadu, put the Paget Timon of the Tate, the Parachi, the Day, put the Haja, the Chimmy, Maro, Chimmy, Soda, Cotton, Ron, Martin, Yosal Sabu, the Jofana, which was the Maroma, which is civil. That's the Janda, the Roma, Jingo, State, Chinga, the Koyutunga, the Koyo, such a work. What the wrong is she, that she reached the Jokaji Machina, the Beshina, the mother of the Chimmy, the team of the Soyo, or somebody. That's the Jobi, Jobi hanging of the city around the somebody, around for the somebody. That's the day that the Kajaga State and the Pidua, the Joa, Chi, Dagger, Telso, the somebody, the young Chapachi, and then Egypt is good, Egypt, Egypt, now the Egypt,
And earlier, she was also saying that even from economic point of view, our way of dealing with others affects us considerably. Say, and if we relate to others in a more positive way, it's us who is going to benefit from the karmic point of view. It's like when you hate others and harm others, then from karmically, the result will be that one would be more tending to illnesses, more susceptible to illnesses, and one's life will be short. And likewise, if one is more generous towards others, although immediately one is thinking of benefiting others and something is being given away from others, but in the long term, from a karmic point of view, the result of such an action would be oneself being more affluent and more materially equipped and facilitated. And likewise is the case with what you call taking others' life, which would make ourselves more what you call susceptible to being what you call subjected to a similar action in the long term. Whereas even from a karmic point of view, even if we don't think in a very broad sense, our way of relating with others, and if that is positive, that has a positive effect on oneself. And if it is negative, then it has a negative effect on oneself. Because when we are born, we do see how even being born in the same family, it doesn't spare the siblings from having different experiences, from being susceptible to different experiences, different happenings, and they should have a cause, because anything to happen without cause would be completely absurd, and that would be completely illogical. So if they have a cause, then we cannot come out, we cannot pinpoint to any other causes, then our own actions in relating to others. So that's how, even from a very what you call narrow-minded point of view also, it's by being kind, by being concerned and caring of others, that will affect our own condition in the long term, and also in the short term positively. Whereas if we deal with them and treat them badly, it's us ultimately who is going to suffer the consequences. So this way, if we particularly working from the more universal ground, if we train in seeing the kindnesses of others and see how our very survival and other achievements are dependent on others, if we could develop a sense of appreciation of their contribution, of their kindnesses, of their contribution to us, then naturally we'll develop a sense of respect, a sense of care, closeness towards them. And then this will also, motivate us, instigate us to develop a sense of repaying their kindnesses. And that kind of a sense generates a natural sense of appealing, a natural sense of attraction towards others. Like any child would have a natural attraction, natural sense of attraction towards their mother, irrespective of their physical condition, irrespective of their economic condition, whatnot. And then this is rooted in their appreciation of the kindnesses that they have benefited from, the kindnesses that they have been extended to. So likewise, if by working on the universal ground of how others have been benefiting us, not just in this life, and that too not in one particular situation, but throughout our life and throughout our previous lives, then there is a natural tendency of feeling close towards them. And whenever we see them, kind of a sense of appealing will be generated. And once that is generated, then when we see them in misery, in unwanted situation, our natural tendency would be to wish them free from that situation. When we see them enjoying, when we see them enjoying a pleasant moment, our natural wish would be, our natural reaction would be to rejoice in that and also wish that they continue to do so. So those are respectively the mental attitudes of compassion and love. And since that is based on a universal ground, we will be able to feel that naturally, feel that kind of a genuine sense of love and compassion towards others, irrespective of our immediate, considerations. And once we develop that, then eventually if we kind of train ourselves more into that and cultivate love and compassion more and more, and make ourselves familiarized, more and more accustomed and familiarized with those reasonings and with those mental cultivation, the natural, natural mental attitude would be to eventually shoulder the responsibility of working for them in delivering them from sufferings, and also in adorning them with joy and happinesses. And thus, this is what is called the special insight, the special resolve, the special resolve, the resolve of taking the responsibility of others upon oneself. And then, once we develop that kind of a special resolve of taking responsibility, then through that strong urge of really wondering what would be the right way to benefit them in the ultimate sense, benefiting them in the sense of adorning them with lasting joy and happiness, not merely temporary contentment or temporary joy, but rather lasting joy and happiness, and also freeing them from suffering once for all. Then we see how attaining Buddhahood by being fully enlightened ourselves, fully compassionate, fully enlightened ourselves, fully skillful ourselves, can then bring about lasting joy and lasting happiness to others. So that way we will eventually develop a genuine sense of aspiration towards Buddhahood, so that one could be of ultimate, a lasting benefit to others. And this is called bodhicitta. So this is how one way we train in the altruistic way of thinking, eventually culminating to the development of bodhicitta, which is like the pinnacle or the zenith or the highest attitude of altruism towards others.
我们的心